A story of unexpected connections and the kindness that binds us, Margaret Sullivan had always been a woman of quiet strength. At 34, life had handed her more than her share of trials, but she faced each day with the same gentle determination that had carried her through nursing school as a young mother. Her daughter Emma was 7 now, a bright-eyed little girl with blonde pigtails and a smile that could warm the coldest winter morning. That particular Tuesday started like any other, except Emma had woken with a fever. Margaret pressed her palm against her daughter's forehead and felt her heart sink. The thermometer confirmed what she already knew. Emma was too sick for school. Margaret worked as the executive assistant to James Mitchell, the CEO of Mitchell Healthcare Solutions. In the 3 years she'd been with the company, she'd never missed a day. Today, though, she had no choice but to bring Emma along. Her mother was out of town, and the backup sitter had canceled at the last minute. She dressed Emma in her favorite gray sweater and wrapped a burgundy scarf around her neck. Emma clutched her worn stuffed rabbit, a gift from Margaret's late husband, who'd passed when Emma was just 2 years old. "We're going to Mommy's work today." "Sweetheart," Margaret explained softly, smoothing Emma's curls. "You'll need to be very quiet and rest in the corner of my office. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded, her usual energy dampened by the fever. "I promise, Mommy." The morning went smoother than Margaret had dared hope. Emma dozed on a makeshift bed of cushions, and Margaret worked steadily through the mountain of correspondence that required Mr. Mitchell's attention. James Mitchell was known throughout the building as fair but exacting, a man who expected professionalism above all else. Around 11 o'clock, Margaret heard Mr. Mitchell's voice in the hallway. He was returning early from his morning meetings. Her pulse quickened. She glanced at Emma, who was awake now, sitting up and looking around with curious eyes. Before Margaret could prepare herself, Mr. Mitchell appeared in her doorway. He was tall, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, wearing a navy suit that spoke of understated elegance. His expression was typically serious as he began to speak. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to—" He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze landing on Emma. Margaret stood quickly. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. My daughter is ill, and I had no other options today. I promise she won't disturb." But something strange was happening. James Mitchell had gone completely still. His face had lost all color, and his eyes were fixed on Emma with an intensity that made Margaret's breath catch. Emma, clutching her rabbit, tilted her head and studied the tall man with innocent curiosity. Then, to Margaret's absolute horror, Emma smiled brightly and said, "Daddy?" The word hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Margaret felt the world tilt. "Emma, no, sweetheart. This is Mr. Mitchell, my boss. He's not—" But James Mitchell had sunk slowly into the chair across from Margaret's desk. His hands were trembling. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "How old is she?" Margaret's protective instincts flared. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't understand what—" "Please." His eyes met hers, and Margaret saw something there she'd never seen in 3 years of working together. Raw vulnerability. "How old is your daughter?" "She's 7. She'll be 8 in April." James closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were glistening. "What was your maiden name?" Margaret felt her knees weaken. She sat down slowly. "Harrison." "Margaret Harrison!" James inhaled sharply. "I knew a Margaret Harrison once. About 9 years ago. In Philadelphia, at the medical conference at the Grand Hotel." The memory hit Margaret like a wave. She'd been finishing her nursing degree, volunteering at a healthcare symposium. There had been a man, kind, handsome, easy to talk to. They'd spent one evening together, sharing stories over coffee that turned into dinner, talking about dreams and losses. He'd told her about recently losing his wife to cancer. She'd told him about her fears of raising a child alone, about her husband who died in Afghanistan. One evening had become something more. A moment of connection in the midst of grief. 2 lonely people finding brief comfort in each other. He'd left the next morning for an emergency in Seattle. She'd never gotten his full name, only James. And 6 weeks later, she'd discovered she was pregnant. "You couldn't be," Margaret whispered. James leaned forward. "Margaret Harrison." You were studying to be a nurse. Your husband had been in the military. We talked about loss and hope and second chances. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. All these years she'd never imagined, never thought she'd see him again. And then, of all the companies in all the cities in America, she'd ended up working for him, never realizing the connection. "Why did she call you Daddy?" James asked, his voice breaking slightly. Margaret glanced at Emma, who was watching them both with wide, intelligent eyes. "I have a photograph," Margaret said quietly. "Just one. Someone took it at the conference. You can barely see your face, but it's there on my phone. I showed it to Emma once, told her that was the man who gave me the greatest gift. She was too young to understand, but she's looked at that picture 100 times. James pressed his palms against his eyes. When he lowered his hands, tears were streaming down his face. "I have a daughter. Mr. Mitchell, James, I never meant to keep this from you. I tried to find you, but I only knew your first name. And later, when I came to work here, I never imagined. You were just my boss. I never connected." James stood and walked slowly toward Emma. He knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. Emma watched him with that same curious, trusting expression. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "My name is James. I'm very happy to meet you." Emma smiled, her small hand reaching out to touch his face with innocent boldness. "You look sad, Mr. James." He laughed through his tears. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm actually happier than I've been in a very long time." Margaret watched, her own eyes brimming with tears, as James reached out and gently took Emma's small hand in his larger one. "Would it be okay?" he asked, his voice gentle and wondering. "If I spent some time with you and your mommy today?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Will you read me a story? Mommy says I have to rest, but resting is boring." James glanced at Margaret, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. What followed was a day unlike any other. James canceled all his meetings. He read to Emma from books they found in the company library. He asked Margaret 1,000 questions about Emma's birth, her first words, her favorite things. He listened to every detail with the